The confluence of the Teple and the hot spring at Carlsbad, now Karlovy Vary in the Czech Republic. The inflow of warm water provokes the formation of transverse blocking currents in the water masses, i.e., the temperature of the water masses deviates from the anomaly point of zero point 0.4 degrees Celsius. Note the barren riverbank destruction of the riverbed and bank. Water masses which flow under a negative temperature gradient destroy the channel. Wherever we look, we see the dreadful disintegration of the very bridges of life, the capillaries and the bodies they have created, caused by mindless mechanical human acts. These actions have robbed the earth's blood, water, of its soul. It is therefore inevitable that the larger and more expensive these regulatory structures become, the greater will be the ensuing damage. In the lower reaches of the Danube, almost 1,000,000 hectares of valuable farmland have been lost due to the regulation of the upper reaches. Similar conditions apply to all other rivers. This is a phenomenon akin to triboluminescence, which relates to the light given off by crystalline rocks under friction or violent pressure. It is attributed to the energy emitted by the electrons contained in the rocks as they return from a pressure-induced excited state to their rest orbits. Ed. Water masses. This expression refers not only to the body of water generally, but also to the various swirling volumes and filaments of water of different temperatures, densities, and energetic content whose values are prescribed by the inner dynamics of the water. Ed. Even today, the river engineers fail to understand the true nature and purpose of water. The harder he tries to conduct it by the shortest and straightest route to the sea, the more it will tend to form beds, the longer will be its path, and the worse its quality. The flow of water down a natural gradient obeys a sublime inner law whose power our hydraulic experts are quite unable to comprehend. In the absence of this inner conformity with law, all flowing water ought to accelerate faster and faster until it ultimately transfers to a vaporous state. Science maintains that water is braked by internal and external friction, though it is well known that friction is associated with fast-flowing water decreases, which leads to an increase in tractive force and internal friction. This simple observation invalidates certain essential propositions in the complex of current hydromechanical theories. Where, then, is the real secret of steadiness in the flow of draining water masses? The force that breaks the flow of water down a gradient is a resistance which acts against the force of gravity, a circulation of energy, operating in the opposite direction to the current. This is also true of all metabolic processes and gives water its character and thus its soul. Contemporary systems of river regulation inhibit this vital function. The logical outcome of this is the loss of water's inner braking power. The water becomes soulless, without character, and therefore aggressive. The confluence of the Teple and the Eger, the Eppel, previously warmed by an affluent hot spring, cools off in the lower reaches, i.e., the temperature of the water masses approaches the anomaly point of zero point 0.4 degrees Celsius. Note the fertile riverbank, the narrowing of the channel cross-section, and the straight flow of water. Water masses which flow under a positive temperature gradient build up the riverbank. The cancerous decay of organisms from our senseless toil. The more extensive regulatory works become, destroying water's naturally ordained inner functions, the greater the ensuing danger to the river banks. and the surrounding area. Now, characterless, the water breaks its bonds. Having become unstable, it seeks to regain its soul with one last supreme effort. The water masses abandon their proper course, and countless waterborne energy bodies are dropped by the exhausted water. Disoriented, it now turns on these organisms and robs them of their life force. Deprived of their souls, their sources of energy, they begin to rot. Bacteria develop, and the earth's arteries are suffused with a cancerous decay. Sinking into the ground, this diseased water now contaminates groundwater. As it rises through the capillaries of the soil and vegetation, this very blood of the earth carries the embryo of this fearful disease with it up into the widest variety of plants. This leads to the qualitative degeneration of vegetation, principally in the internal decay of the forest trees. As a further consequence, it leads to a regression in the quality of everything in which water circulates. Ultimately, in accordance with a law which operates with awesome constancy, it will slowly but surely come around to our turn. The spreading of the most terrible of all diseases, cancer, is the inevitable consequence of these unnatural systems of regulation. It goes without saying that specialists in other fields also have a hand in this work of destruction. The substance, water, from our senseless toil. The revelation of the secret of water will put to end all manner of speculation or expediency and their excrescences, to which belong war, hatred, impatience, and discord of every kind. The thorough study of water therefore signifies the end of monopolies, the end of all domination in the true sense of the word, and the start of a socialism arising from the development of individualism in its most perfect form. Viktor Schauberger, 1939, Implosion Magazine, number 6, page 29. By taking the right paths, we are led back to nature, and hence to the source of life, to healthy water. The higher up such water springs forth from Mother Earth, the healthier it is. Borne up by inner energies, it emerges only when ripe, when it has achieved its proper physical composition, and when it must leave the earth. The absorbed air content of such water consists of about 96% gaseous, physically dissolved carbons. As a result of the psyche or the character of water can be described as being of very high caliber. There are some springs which exhibit such a high content of carbonic acid. This expression is in any case incorrect, that when small animals inhale the vapor from it in the surrounding atmosphere, they die almost instantly. The dog spring in Naples being an example. This water is also dangerous for people who suck it into their mouths directly from the spring and inhale its rising gases at the same time. Mountain folk call such springs poisonous water. Today, springs can still be found which people avoid and which are fenced off to prevent access by grazing cattle. According to folklore, these springs are inhabited by water worm, which, if swallowed irrevocably, cause death within a few days. If a metal container is filled with such water and placed in the open air, the water heats up inordinately quickly, displaying a slight effervescence at the surface. Incidentally, the phenomenon also sometimes happens when wells are bored. Whenever these events occur, the exposed water quickly subsides and the well is soon dry. When such water is exposed to the air, the emergence of an abundance of bacterial life is soon observed. The warmer the water becomes, the less complex and the more primitive the bacteria. If warmed up rainwater is poured into this water, a few drops of oil are added and the whole container is sealed. The contents of the container will very soon explode. What has happened here? The negative atmosphere, the psyche containing the high-grade spring water, oxidizes and interacts with warm, heavily oxygenated, and consequently predominantly positively charged air. When this interactive expansion encounters an obstacle, and when a high-grade carbon is present, for example in the form of oil, it shatters the container. If such water is drunk quickly when the body is hot, the same phenomenon occurs in the body of the drinker. The affected person feels a stabbing pain in the lungs and dies within a few days. Alpine farmers describe this rapid sickening as the vanishing lung disease, galloping consumption. If such cases are less frequent today than in earlier times, this is only because such high-grade water is now rarely found. By means of the above interactions, energies will be either freed or bound. The defining factors connected with this encompass the diverse composition of the atmosphere and the varying effect of light, both of which are conditional on the season and the height of the sun. The longer the water is exposed, the influence or light, and the more it comes into contact with the air during flow or through mechanical motion, the more it will relinquish its former geospheric characteristics, absorb those of the atmosphere, and become warm, stale, and insipid. The more immature the water emerging from seepage springs or otherwise extracted from the ground, and the smaller the difference between contrasting magnitudes originally present, the weaker will be the interactions. The more inferior the quality of the products of this energy exchange, the less complex are the microorganisms which evolve. This necessarily results in the mental and physical degeneration of all those organisms that use this low-quality water in order to function. If the vitally important oxidizing processes can no longer occur in an appropriate high-grade form, it is unreasonable to expect to find high-grade properties and processes continuing in water that is no longer able to maintain its inner ripeness or has lost its previously mature characteristics. It should therefore come as no surprise if in such water a variety of more primitive life forms come into existence which ultimately pose a threat even to human life. Whereas an initial supply of oxygen was necessary for the emergence and development of these organisms, an excessive concentration of oxygen or an oversupply of a lower grade oxygen would tend to be fatal to them. The same sort of thing happens to us if we wish to visit the sphere of oxygen, the stratosphere. We must take with us oxygen of the same composition normally encountered in our own sphere. The same holds true for the supply of fresh water and on oxygen voyages. If excessive quantities of oxygen are injected into water, then in the long run such water can support neither bacterium nor human being. Since the bacterium has no other way to breathe, it must die immediately, whereas the human being, who at least still has a chance to gulp down some healthy air, perishes only in the course of time. The body's metabolic processes are dependent on a specific composition of basic elements, the carbon and oxygen groups contained in water. Similarly, the development of qualitatively high-grade vegetation is dependent upon there being a particular ratio between the quantities and qualities of these substances and the basic formative substance, water. These quantities and qualities generate a particular internal temperature appropriate to each organism in which they are taken up. As a result of the interactions occurring during these reciprocal oxidizing processes, the actual expression here is Earth sphere, where Viktor Schauberger uses the word sphere in this context. This denotes the collective embodiment of all the physical, material, and energetic characteristics inhering in any given sphere, be it the hydrosphere, geosphere, biosphere, atmosphere, etc. A particular inner temperature produces a certain physical form, which in turn generates a special kind of immaterial energy we encounter as character. Hence the old saying, metis sana in corporo sano, a healthy mind in a healthy body. If the composition of basic substances should in any way be altered, not only must the metabolic basis for further growth of the body change, but so must its spiritual and intellectual growth and further development. Briefly summarized, healthy air, healthy food, and healthy water produce not only a healthy body, but also good character traits. Concerning process of your creation, evolution, and metabolism, from Mensch und Technik, section 66.0, volume 2, 1993. The following section is taken from a special edition of the German quarterly periodical Mensch und Technik, Naturgemäß, Humanity and Technology in Accordance with Nature, which is devoted entirely to the then recently discovered transcript of a notebook compiled in 1941 by a Swiss Arnold Holl. This not only recorded details of his visits to Viktor Schauberger in 1936 and 1937, but included verbatim accounts of Schauberger's contemporary writings, letters, notes, and comments recorded by Holl verbatim. Funded by private subscriptions, Mensch und Technik was first published by a group of scientists calling themselves the Gruppe der Neuen. Their aim was to explore Viktor Schauberger's theories and to interpret them scientifically. Early articles came from a number of contributors, including Viktor Schauberger himself and his son Walter. Joking aside, making water is not at all a simple matter, for it requires intuitive understanding. Every drop of water is virgin territory and a source of unlimited power. According to science, horsepower by the thousand exists in every gram of water, yet dare we take the plunge to extract it. This process of extreme importance, completely natural and therefore simple too, for water indeed embodies the unity out of which the immeasurable multiplicity subsequently arises. Water eggs are present in both metal and mineral. They should be produced and allowed to incubate from these substances. A little heat, a little cold, a little light, and a little darkness are quite enough so to inflame the passions of metal and mineral alike that they produce a chemically pure water. Once this stage has been reached, the whole begins to grow spontaneously. All it depends on the proper preparation. According to Diepel in Walter Schauberger, Viktor's physicist's son, every gram of any substance, 1 cubic centimeter of water for example, contains a stored energy equal to 25 million kilowatt hours. The phenomena and processes of transmutation which arise from differences in energy potential and produce water eggs permeate and animate the remaining substances. Being in a less organized state, the latter would never experience their transformation into an organically higher form of life if they did not exactly force the juvenile or virgin water to carry out purposeful work before their ascension. It is these substances that lift the water up and not the water that raises them. Precisely the reverse takes place in the high atmosphere, where it is the juvenile water, in this case, that forces the very buoyant substances to conduct the water created in the atmosphere gently back to earth. In other words, the juvenile water ensures that the heavenly substances imbued with mechanical levitative energies are continuously returned to Earth in order to assist other substances to reach higher regions and levels of evolvement. Thus, in nature, mechanical pressure and physical suction are always in a condition of rhythmical alternation, which is why there is no state of rest in this world. For the relation, which is why there is no state of rest in the world, between pressure and suction is always in the ratio of 2 to 3. The concept is so simple that it requires a certain finesse not to reveal too much, because it would be absolutely no blessing to humanity if, with its present attitudes, was suddenly given control over these elemental forces. The most important precondition for the production of water is the angle, for through it the feelings find their expression, such as happens with laughter. Without pulling the angles of the mouth, laughing would be impossible. U or N, this angle is a oneness in a monolinear plane, infinite and very similar to double O, OO. The infinite plane in what we describe as time, all we have to do is to create organic loops in order to produce water eggs, and from them the water itself, which on its part then creates the spaces for nutritive material. These water eggs are even sometimes visible to the naked eye. Because we are here concerned with the products of the anomaly point, which are incubated with cold instead of heat. Once such a process of incubation has begun, then the heat is dissipated in the water. Because all processes of growth require heat, this is why rivers that cool themselves as they flow increase their attractive force and carry the knotty stones, which lie so heavily in the stomachs of river regulators, far out into the seas and create new land. In the opposite case, they create water deserts. Protein formation. This can appear in many different shapes and sizes. Protein is in the earth in a solid state, in water in a liquid state, and in air in a